This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Everybody loves to complain about the referees, especially when it doesn't go the way that they want it to. But as Browns fans who have been on the wrong side of some calls before, we know that it's never just one thing that leads to a game being called down to the referees. And honestly, I just don't get the sensation around this one. Because all of those penalties were fair calls. I think they were. You can argue about the pass interference that happened on the goal line, the one to Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I think that's probably the most arguable one, but it still happened. You're just arguing about if you call it in the moment, and it's not necessarily that it didn't happen. It happened. He passed interference. It was a ticky-tack call, but I mean, it happened. Sometimes those things get called in those moments. Sometimes they don't get caught in those moments. There have been times where, remember Amari Cooper last year against the Ravens? He got held, obviously, by a corner. They didn't call it. Sometimes they call it. Sometimes they don't. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of officiating. Sometimes you're on the good side of it. Sometimes you're on the non-beneficiary side of it. But even then, I don't know why people are complaining about that Phillip Walker when he got the ball knocked out of his hand, but Amari Cooper got held. Like, you can't hold Amari Cooper in that situation. And that wiped away the fumble. Be mad at the dude who held. But everybody's focused on the refs. It's interesting to me. I really think that people are making a bigger deal out of this, but let's hear what people from ESPN think.
To get the go-ahead points, and so I will give him credit. Also want to give a shout-out to the referees because it feels like they were Cleveland Browns fans yesterday at the end of that game with the penalties, the DPI, and the holding call on Amari Cooper. But, again, Cleveland's defense paved the way for them to be able to win that football game, Smalls, and Myles Garrett specifically. They had 4 takeaways, but Myles Garrett was responsible for 2 of those takeaways with strip sacks.
Let me just ask you a follow-up on this. In your mind, Deshaun Watson...
really felt like Deshaun Watson was the reason the Cleveland Browns won a game. For
Wait,
$230
what?
million guaranteed,
What?
That's quite the statement.
I mean, I'm not watching...
What? Come on. Like, we don't got to reach. Like, you could just say he's not playing well. But there's been the Washington game. You can argue the Cincinnati game this year, the Tennessee game. Like, he had 2 touchdowns in the Cincinnati game rushing. He had touchdowns in the Tennessee game, obviously. Like, we don't got to reach. We don't got to reach. He's not playing well. He hasn't had a great start. We don't got to reach. But people continue to reach. Like, if you just want to make the argument, hey, look, it has not been an ideal landing for him. He has not gotten off to a great start this year. This was supposed to be the year where he finally got off to a clean start. It looks like another asterisk year for him. And how many more games can he go with an asterisk before you have to just make a decision on him? Yeah, that's a fair argument to make. But people keep reaching for this. And it doesn't, like, just stop. Just stop reaching.
Every second of every Browns game... But
you're not locked in.
I mean,
but I think we keep going back to the defense.
It's never the wrong answer because you were specific. You said the Browns, not. I mean, I remember watching.
I'm talking about the Browns
the Texans
specifically.
Kicking butt.
Specifically for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, like never. That he was the reason. I mean, coming into this past week, CC was.
How can you say that confidently when you just admitted that you haven't watched every Browns game that he's played in? You're just saying shit at this point. Let's move on.
It's been awful.
But what does that say about him and this situation? That you can't point to one wow moment that he's had so far in his Browns tenure that makes you say he won that game for them or he elevated his team. And you're looking at P.J. Walker getting the job done?
Yeah, I don't know. Smalls, it's a great question because I don't know what you're supposed to do. Like, do you just voluntarily say, sit down? Like, you're obviously banged up. And you're mentally or physically, whatever it is, or both. Sit down for a little bit. We have Seattle coming up. Then we have the Cardinals. Then at the Ravens. Then home against the Steelers. Those are the next 4. We're good. We got you. We'll get you back in whenever it is. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that's scarier than anything we just said, CC. In my mind, they're probably not encouraging him to rush at this point. They're like, we're good. You're good. Take your time.
Yeah, but here's why he should want to rush. This team actually has a chance to do something because of how good their defense is, because of how good their running game is. I mean, they had another day on the ground where they rushed for over 150 yards. If you can run the ball the way the Browns can, and if you can play defense the way the Browns are capable of, then there's no reason why this team can't get to the postseason with competent quarterback play. And that's a huge step for this organization, just continuing to be consistent in terms of being able to find a way to get to the playoffs. And so if Deshaun Watson doesn't come back when he has this team that's supporting him, then I don't... It's hard not to look at the trade and the decision to guarantee the contract as one of the worst moves in NFL history. It might already be that, regardless of what happens the rest of the way. But Deshaun Watson has got to find a way to return return in kind, the confidence and the trust that the organization has given to him with this deal by being able to go out there and help this team get more wins.
And
all right, so I'll respond to that. I don't think that this is going to be looked at as one of the worst trades in NFL history. It might be one of the most disliked trades in NFL history, but ultimately when you look at it, it's not really been that bad of a trade. And here's what I mean by this. Even if Deshaun Watson does not work out, let's live in Deshaun Watson comes back, he plays 8 games, he looks terrible. They make the evaluation that they want to move on from him. Okay, what's next for the Cleveland Browns? Okay, so if you live in that world and you want to move on from Deshaun Watson, what you're going to do first is probably play DTR in 2024. See what you have in DTR. If he is somebody, if he's not somebody, figure it out. It's why 2025, you have your first round picks back. You can draft a replacement in 25, or if you don't need to draft a replacement, you can start building around DTR, and you can cut Deshaun Watson in 26 with minimal penalty. It won't really be that big of a deal. I think it's $8 million in dead cap. So in 2026, or what's more likely is that if you do decide to move on from Deshaun after this year and go with DTR in 24, you will work out some kind of buyout trade agreement so he can play somewhere else. And so you can just get rid of that money off the books, and it'll probably be like 20 million dead cap, but it wouldn't matter because you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. So they're set up that even if this thing stinks with Deshaun throughout the rest of the way, that they have a pretty easy out of it, and that even if this doesn't work out, that they're going to be fine. Also, another thing that factors into them being fine, because I know somebody's going to bring up, well, Quincy, they gave up 3 first-round picks for him. Yeah, but they've gotten a first-round value out of Martin Emerson. I think nobody's going to disagree with me if I say that if the Browns drafted Martin Emerson in the first round, they would be satisfied with that pick. The answer is probably yes to that, right? You would have been satisfied with that pick if you would have gotten Martin Emerson in the first round. I think the Browns are more satisfied with Martin Emerson than a lot of people are with their first round picks from that draft. So you didn't really lose that first round pick. You got a first round value out of that draft. Last year, you get DeJuan Jones. DeJuan Jones looks like he might make the Pro Bowl in his first year. The Browns are more satisfied with that 4th round pick than most teams are with their first round pick. It's hard to argue that they didn't get first round value out of DeJuan Jones. You also look back at some of the young talent on this team. You've doubled up in first round talent. You get Greg Newsome and JOK in the same year. You get Grant Delpit in the second round one year where you trade your first round pick. So you got a first round value player, and you continue like you are overloaded basically on this team with first round talent. So missing one, like let's say next year you don't hit on anybody that becomes a first round value player, right? Even if that happens, you're so loaded with first round talent, young first round talent on this team that you can stand losing a year. So while you did trade 3 first round picks, like again, you can ask yourself, would you rather have Martin Emerson? Well, not would you rather have, because you could have had them both technically, but the Browns are more happy with Martin Emerson than like the Eagles are with Jordan Davis. The Browns are more happy with DeJuan Jones than the Panthers are with Okonkwo. So those are first-round picks. Some of them really early first-round picks. And the Browns were able to do. So, like, let's say worst case scenario, you're going to not get first round value in one draft out of the 3 that you traded for. You really just gave up 1 first and then a bunch of money to Deshaun, and the money can be wiped away as long as you're willing to pay for it. It's really not that big of a deal. So it's not going to be it's not that bad of a trade. We are past the point with that trade to where even if it doesn't work out, it will be franchise resetting bad, right? I think that the Denver trade is much worse because not only did Denver trade for Russ, not only did they give him a big contract that they're stuck with at 32 years old, they also doubled down and traded traded a first round pick for a coach who ultimately doesn't like him. And that gets added on to it, right? So I think that would be probably a better candidate for a worst trade of all time. But again, since Watson's name's attached to it, people are going to want to make it as bad as possible, which, I mean, like, I get why people want to do that, but it's an unpopular trade. It's not that bad of a trade when you actually look at how things worked out for the Browns. Now, again, nobody wants to be here talking about that. I would rather be in a world where we're not even talking about if this trade's bad, what we have to do, if Deshaun ends up not being good, because I just want, like, the team to be as good as possible. And part of this team being as good as possible is Deshaun Watson playing really, really well. And if he were playing really, really well, if he were consistently staying healthy, we'd be having a different conversation right now. We'd be more excited about the team because we could see the future. We'd be like Baltimore Raven fans are, where they think they have an MVP candidate, a quarterback, a good enough defense, and a good enough offense, right? Like, we would be through the moon, but instead we're doing Watson watch. I'm not trying to discount that this has been frustrating or rage inducing to some point. I absolutely understand that. But again, you can't make that lose where we actually are with the team, where we actually are with the player, and where we actually are with the franchise, and saying stuff like, oh, this team hasn't had basically saying Watson hasn't had a good game since he came back. That's crazy. Or hasn't been an integral part to the team's winning since he's come back. I mean, it's weird to say when he's over 500 as a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. It's a really weird thing to say. And it's really based off of anecdotal evidence and what you may remember, and especially when you're making your whole point off of somebody who admitted that they don't watch the Browns that often, and saying that since that person who doesn't watch the Browns that often doesn't remember so much, that makes the contract a bad thing. And it's like, yeah, the contract might end up being not a great move, but I think the blowback on the contract, it's just not that big of a deal. It's not that expensive anymore. It's not even in the top 8 of salaries for quarterback. And it's something that if it needs to be moved off of, there's avenues to get rid of it. Nobody wants to hear that, and nobody wants to go through that again, by the way. But that's the truth. The Browns will be fine if Watson doesn't work out long term. But it will suck for this year if he doesn't work out. I will admit that.
What point, if you're the Cleveland Browns, are you like, we're just going to continue to roll with what's working? I know it's PJ Walker, but they've won 2 games in a row now, including one over the San Francisco 49ers. Yep. At some point, do you not want to do the start, stop thing with Deshaun? Are you ready? Are you healthy? Let's pull you out. Like, at some point, don't you want to have some consistency?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, you do want to have consistency. You want to have consistency with your game plan. And think about this. With Deshaun Watson getting the start, it's fair to say that PJ Walker didn't get the lion's share of the reps in practice. Right. So that takes away from his ability to be effective when he's called into duty. So you do want to have some confidence and some consistency week to week in what you're doing. But here's the thing. PJ Walker, a couple of mistakes a game, I guess they find a way to live with it, or they find a way to work around it. But Deshaun Watson threw 2 picks yesterday. I mean, one got called back on a replay review by Kenny Moore, but it was essentially 2 picks and 5 pass attempts. Mm-hmm. So if Deshaun Watson is going to do that anyway, then why not go with PJ Walker, a guy that's been able to win you 2 games?
Here's the amazing thing, CC. You said this team could get to the playoffs with
Now, here's a good point that I think she made. I do think the Browns need to change their approach with Deshaun. I know that they want to go day by day, week by week, because, like, you know, a healthy Deshaun gives you the best chance to win. But a healthy Deshaun is the key part to that sentence. Gives you the best chance to win. Not a hobbled Deshaun, not a Deshaun with an injury that's debilitating his play. A healthy Deshaun gives you the best chance to win. Browns need to look at this injury in 4-week chunks, right? 4-week chunks. Can he play? Is the answer yes or no? If the answer is no, he is out for 4 weeks. Okay? Like, we need to get to a point. If we're never going to have comfort with him taking a hit because you're worried that it's going to be a throwing shoulder surgery if he takes too many hits, and he is Deshaun Watson, a man who is not averse and never been averse to taking hits. If that's going to be the case all year, then you might have to consider just wrapping it up for the season, because it's not realistic to expect him to take minimal hits. That's just not how he plays football. He's going to run. He's going to hold the ball. He's going to try to make plays. He's going to throw it downfield. He's going to take hits. He's going to put a lot of wear and tear on that throwing shoulder. And if you're not going to be at a level of comfort with him at any point in this year, taking hits because you're worried it might turn into a throwing shoulder injury, then just take him out for the year. If you feel like you can be there eventually, 4-week chunks, right? Because this team needs to know who's playing quarterback week in, week out. It is hurting your wide receivers. It is hurting your offensive line. It is hurting your offensive game planning. It's hurting everything that's going into offense. PJ Walker is not a great quarterback. I like PJ Walker, but I know PJ Walker ain't going to be like a franchise quarterback. We know that. But PJ Walker is much better than he's gotten the chance to show. And part of the reason he hasn't been able to play some of those good PJ games that we have seen is because he is never in a position where, like, he knows for a fact he's starting. Like, the one time he did, he played all right versus the 49ers, right? Threw a pick. He wasn't great in that game. People are saying he beat the 49ers, but, like, let's be real here. Like, we know who beat the 49ers that week. It wasn't the offense. But, you know, he played okay. You're not giving whoever the backup is a good chance to play well. Just look at Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett, not better than Deshaun Watson. Jacoby Brissett, not more talented than Deshaun Watson. Jacoby Brissett, more talented than PJ Walker. And you got a lot out of Jacoby Brissett last year because he knew for 11 games he was playing. The team knew for 11 games this was the situation. And because of that, you were able to get the most out of him. So that's what I think the approach should change to. Hey, is nothing wrong with that shoulder? Are we being too safe on it? Like, are we just being overly concerned? Like, if he can play and if he's healthy and if nothing's wrong with that shoulder, let him play. Ride it out. Okay, I don't care if it's a bad first 5 throws. Sometimes maybe he just needs to knock the rust off. It might not be shoulder related. I think we're assuming a lot on those 5 throws. He didn't look good, but he didn't look good his first 5 throws coming back, and that was rust related, right? So how do we know if this is just him getting used to playing again versus him having a bad throwing shoulder and that's what's throwing things off? So either, like, he's healthy and we need to just kind of thug it out with him and let him go and not be concerned about, you know, if this is the shoulder or that's the shoulder, and just evaluate him based on what he's doing. Or if you're so concerned, if it is concerning medically, from a medical standpoint, to have him out there, okay, cool. Then just 4 weeks at a time. Okay, he's not going to play. He's out for the next 4 weeks. And then we get to that 4 weeks. Are we at that point? to where we can let him play through some of this stuff, okay, then he's out for that. Because if every time he takes a hit, you have to go to the sideline and insert PJ Walker and figure out what's going on, then it's not sustainable. And it's not beneficial to the team. So I would agree there. They need to just stabilize the position. I don't care who it is. PJ, you can trade for Jacoby. I don't care who it is. The stabilization is the important part, because you can bring Jacoby into this mess. He's not going to look great. I promise you that. Like, if you just bring Jacoby into the middle of this mess, he's not going to look great. Part of what made Jacoby look good was the fact that the team knew Jacoby was playing for 11 weeks. Let the team know, hey, man, PJ's in for 4 weeks. Figure it out. Let's work it. Let's work with PJ. PJ, let's get the most out of you. Or DTR or whoever it is. But we can't keep playing this hanky-panky game at quarterback. It can't be maybe it's Deshaun this week, or maybe it's PJ this week, or maybe this day we think it's going to be Deshaun, and then maybe this day it's going to be PJ, and then maybe here and here. It's driving everybody crazy in the fan base, and I bet it's not great for the locker room. That is the number one thing the Browns have to figure out. Now, as far as the refs in that game versus Indy, y'all just mad. Okay? Y'all just mad. I don't think the refs gave them that game. They still had to convert on 4th down. The Colts had 4 times to stop that outcome. They weren't successful. You know, everybody wants to be mad at the refs. Be mad at your players for not executing. Be mad at your corner for holding in the end zone. That's a number 1 no-no. Don't do that. Be mad at your corner for in the end zone not turning to look for the ball. That's a no-no. It's a no-no. You don't have to do that. It's not even that much distance. Those are mistakes that young players make. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Colts had young corners. Seems like the cost of doing business. You got young corners. They make young corner mistakes. We've gone through them growing pains with corners where they make those mistakes. It is what it is. It's the game, baby. You gotta just accept it. Stop crying about them flags. Colts fans, y'all know what it was. It is the cost of doing business. You want to have a young secondary? Cool. This is what a young secondary gets you at times, especially in the most important times. And then, hey, man, Browns ran it right up the middle to win the game. You got DeForest Buckner. Like, we gave you the best chance to stop it. Still didn't do it. You lost the game. Fair and square. You lost it. Stop telling me how the refs gave us it. You lost the game fair and square. And if the Browns didn't get one of those calls, I'd be like, hey, it sucks if we didn't get the call, but we should have never let the Colts get to 38 points. So don't tell me about the refs. I don't want to hear about the refs no more.